The year 1943 marked a pivotal turning point in World War II. The Axis powers, Germany, Italy and Japan had enjoyed significant early victories. They controlled vast territories across Europe, North Africa and the Pacific. However, the tide began to turn in 1943. The Allied forces, led by the United States, Great Britain and the Soviet Union, gained momentum on multiple fronts. This essay will examine the key events of 1943 that shifted the balance of power and set the stage for Allied victory. The year began with the brutal Battle of Stalingrad still raging. In North Africa, the Allies were pushing back against Rommel's Afrika Korps. The Pacific theater saw fierce fighting in places like Guadalcanal. Each battle, each campaign contributed to the larger narrative of 1943, a year of hard-fought victories and a turning point in the war. The year also witnessed significant political and diplomatic developments. The surrender of Italy in September 1943 dealt a major blow to the Axis powers. The Tron Conference in November brought together the leaders of the United States, Great Britain and the Soviet Union for the first time. This meeting signified the growing unity and cooperation among the Allies. The Battle of Stalingrad, which began in August 1942, raged on into 1943. This brutal battle for control of the city of Stalingrad on the Volga River was a clash of ideologies and military might. For the Germans, Stalingrad represented a strategic and symbolic prize. Capturing the city named after Soviet leader Joseph Stalin would be a significant propaganda victory. The Soviets, however, were determined to defend their motherland. The battle devolved into a brutal street fight, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The bitter cold of the Russian winter added to the misery. In February 1943, the German Sixth Army, trapped and decimated, surrendered to the Soviets. The victory at Stalingrad marked a turning point in the war on the Eastern Front. It shattered the myth of German invincibility and boosted Soviet morale. The Germans suffered irreplaceable losses in men and material. The tide had turned, and the Soviet Union began its long and arduous advance westward towards Germany. While the Battle of Stalingrad raged in the east, the Allies were engaged in a fierce campaign in North Africa. The campaign had begun in 1940 with the Italians' invasion of Egypt. The Germans, under the command of the skilled General Erwin Rommel, known as the Desert Fox, intervened to support their Axis ally. The campaign seesawed back and forth across the deserts of North Africa. The British, with their Commonwealth allies, fought bravely against the Afrika Korps. The tide turned decisively in the Allies' favor with the Second Battle of El Alamein in late 1942. This victory, coupled with the Anglo-American landings in Morocco and Algeria, put the Axis forces in North Africa in a precarious position. By May 1943, the Axis forces in North Africa had been defeated. The victory opened up the Mediterranean Sea for Allied shipping and paved the way for the invasion of Italy. The campaign also provided the Western Allies with valuable combat experience that would prove crucial in the upcoming invasion of mainland Europe. With North Africa secured, the Allies turned their attention to Italy. In July 1943, Allied forces landed on the island of Sicily, beginning the liberation of Italy from fascist rule. The invasion of Sicily proved to be the final straw for the Italian people, who were weary of war and disillusioned with their leader, Benito Mussolini. On July 25, 1943, Mussolini was overthrown by his own Grand Council and arrested. A new Italian government, led by Marshal Pietro Badoglio, secretly negotiated an armistice with the Allies. The armistice was publicly announced on September 8, 1943. Italy had switched sides. The fall of Italy was a major political victory for the Allies. It cracked the unity of the Axis powers and forced Germany to divert troops to occupy Italy and fight on another front. However, the fighting in Italy was far from over. German forces fought tenaciously, and the Italian campaign would drag on for almost 2 more years. While land battles raged in Europe and the Pacific, the air war over Europe intensified in 1943. The United States Army Air Forces and the British Royal Air Force launched increasingly heavy bombing raids on German industrial centers, cities, and infrastructure. The goal was to cripple Germany's war-making capacity and, undermine morale. The bombing campaign was not without controversy. The raids caused significant civilian casualties and destroyed many historic cities. However, they also had a significant impact on the German war effort. Factories were destroyed, production was disrupted, and resources were diverted to air defense. The air war also saw the introduction of new technologies and tactics. The USAAF favored daylight precision bombing, while the RAF focused on nighttime area bombing. Both approaches had their advantages and disadvantages. The air war over Europe would continue until the final days of the war, playing a crucial role in the Allied victory. Section 6. Resistance and Tragedy. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Amidst the large-scale battles and campaigns of 1943, acts of resistance against Nazi tyranny continued across occupied Europe. One of the most significant and tragic acts of resistance was the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. The Warsaw Ghetto was the largest of the Jewish ghettos established by the Nazis in German-occupied Poland. In the spring of 1943, the remaining inhabitants of the ghetto, facing deportation to extermination camps, rose up against their oppressors. Armed with whatever weapons they could find, they fought bravely against overwhelming odds. The uprising lasted for several weeks before it was brutally crushed by the Nazis. The ghetto was razed to the ground, and most of its inhabitants were murdered. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, though ultimately unsuccessful, stands as a testament to the courage and spirit of resistance in the face of unimaginable horror. Section 7. Island Hopping, the Guadalcanal Campaign. While the war in Europe raged on, the Pacific theater saw its own share of fierce fighting. The Guadalcanal Campaign, which began in August 1942, was a grueling 6-month battle for control of the strategically important island of Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. The campaign was a brutal struggle for both sides. The Japanese, determined to hold on to Guadalcanal, fought tenaciously. The Americans, fighting in a hostile jungle environment, faced malaria, dysentery, and constant Japanese attacks. The naval battles around Guadalcanal were equally as fierce, with heavy losses on both sides. In February 1943, the Japanese evacuated their remaining forces from Guadalcanal, conceding defeat. The victory marked a turning point in the Pacific War. It was the first major Japanese land defeat of the war and gave the Allies a foothold in the Solomon Islands, which they would use to launch further offensives against the Japanese. Section 8. Tehran, a meeting of Allied leaders. In late November 1943, with the tide of the war clearly turning in the Allies' favor, the leaders of the big three Allied powers met in Tehran, Iran. U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin met for the first time to discuss war strategy and post-war plans. The Tron Conference was a significant event in the course of the war. It demonstrated the growing unity and cooperation among the Allies. The leaders agreed on several key issues, including the opening of a second front in Western Europe, which would come to fruition with the D-Day landings in June 1944, and the future of Germany after the war. The conference also addressed the post-war political order. While differences remained, the leaders agreed on the creation of a new international organization to replace the failed League of Nations. This organization would become the United Nations. Section 9. The Road to Victory, 1943's Enduring Legacy. The year 1943 was a year of profound change in the course of World War II. The tide turned decisively in favor of the Allies. The victories at Stalingrad in North Africa and on Guadalcanal marked the beginning of the end for the Axis powers. The surrender of Italy cracked the Axis unity and opened up a new front in Europe. The year also witnessed the intensification of the air war over Europe and the tragic but heroic Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. The Tron Conference symbolized the growing unity and cooperation among the Allies as they planned for the final defeat of the Axis powers and a new post-war world order. The road to victory was still long and arduous. Many more lives would be lost before the war finally ended in 1945. However, the events of 1943 laid the foundation for Allied victory and shaped the course of the 20th century. The legacies of the battles fought and the sacrifices made in that pivotal year continue to resonate today.